Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Hello, thank you for joining us for episode number 15 of the Ask Rob and Rob podcast, the show where you ask a question and we answer it. Couldn't be much easier than that. This week, Roy has sent us a really interesting question. We'll get to that in a minute. Before we do, though, we'll just let you know how you can ask a question too.
So it's super simple. If you're on your phone now, why don't you give us a call? Pause the podcast, give us a call. Type in 01 3808 00035. That's 013 808 00035. Leave an answer phone message and we will play it on the podcast. Or if you're on your computer and you want to leave us a message that way, super simple. Go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast. That's what Roy did. So let's listen to Roy's question now.
Hi, Rob and Rob. It's Roy Faulkner here from Essex. First of all, fantastic podcast. I think the value that you deliver each and every week for all of your listeners is fantastic. They seem to be getting better and better as you go along as well. So thanks for all the value that you offer to everybody. I think they're great. The question that I was just going to ask you was just with regards to what seems to be a hot topic at the moment, what I keep hearing about on various social media outlets, with also through friends and people that I've been speaking to, and that's lease option deals. I've been hearing a lot about them recently, and I've just saved up money for my sort of second deposit for a buy-to-let, and that's what I'm going to do anyway, but they seem on the face of it like a good idea to gain more exposure to property without having to put any money down. But with all of these things, what looks good on the face of it isn't always the case. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on whether there was a good idea, and if so, why that was, what the benefits are, and if not, if you think they should be avoided, why is that? That's what I'd quite like to know. So once again, brilliant work on the podcast. Thanks a lot. I look forward to hearing you. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you, Roy, first of all, for your very kind words about the podcast. I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah, thank you, Roy. Very kind. We feel even more inclined to answer your question now.
Yes, we do. It's not a prerequisite, but it helps. So we're going to have a stab at answering this question. Before we do, though, not everyone is going to understand what a lease option is. So we'll try and very quickly define that so you know what we're talking about. So essentially, a lease option is where you agree with a vendor that you're going to buy their house from them, or rather have the option to buy their house from them at some point in the next X number of years. So you'll get an option that could last for any amount of time. It could be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, potentially 20 years. But you're going to buy their property at an agreed price at some point in the future. In the meantime, you will take that property over and rent it out. So what will normally happen is that you will pay them the amount of money that they need to pay their mortgage. They can move out and move on. You will then rent the property out as you would do a normal buy-to-let, and that leaves you making money in two different ways. Firstly, you're making a profit every month like you would with a normal buy-to-let, because you are paying their mortgage, but then the rent you're bringing in will hopefully give you a profit over and above your expenses. You're also making a profit at some point in the future because you'll agree to have the option to buy their property at around or about today's prices. So if their property was worth £80,000, you might agree that you'll buy it for 80,000, 70,000, even 90. Maybe you'd be willing to pay more than what it's worth today. Why would you be willing to do that? Because if you've got a 10-year option, you're probably going to think that prices are going to be a lot higher than that at some point. So when that day comes, you can execute the option, sell the property on for a higher price than you agreed to buy it for, and make a profit there as well. So this sounds great to you as a buyer. Why would anyone agree to this? Well, it suits sellers who are in negative equity. If they really want to move on for some reason, but their property is in negative equity, then even if they sold it for what it's worth today, they still wouldn't be able to pay the mortgage company back. So a lease option is a way for them to move on, have the mortgage taken care of, and know that they're going to have that repayment taken care of at some point in the future. So as I said, sounds great to you as an investor. Why isn't everyone doing it? Why are we not shouting about this from the rooftops every time we do an episode of the podcast? Well, there are reasons.
Well, there are. And the first is, Rob's already touched on it, but one of the main target markets for this are for people who are in negative equity. So one of the challenges you're going to have straight away is at the moment, there are less and less people, month by month, because property prices are rising, who fall into negative equity. So we had the crash and there were lots of people in negative equity. But it's been a while, it's 2015. It's been 7 years since the crash. And in fact, it's the end of 2015. You might even be listening to this in 2016. The fact is, it's been a long time since the crash. Now, that means less and less people are in negative equity. So this strategy relies heavily on finding people in that situation. So it's hard to do. The next issue I sort of have with lease options is, and this is not everyone, and certainly not you, Roy, I'm sure you wouldn't do this, but some people take advantage of the people in the lease option situation. And there's been some moral issues around it where people have misused their lease options, not committed to doing what they say they do, and left people in a bit of a sticky situation. It's gotten bad press, lease options, sometimes deservedly, maybe sometimes not. I know there are people who probably execute lease options very ethically and do it the right way. But unfortunately, like many areas of property, there are people who don't. But my real bugbear with lease options is this final point, that the benefits of it are really pushed. Low money in, you get all these benefits. As Rob listed off, it's like, great. All these wonderful things about lease options. What's not pointed out is the fact that there's a lot of work, probably full-time work, to go and find these opportunities in the first place. There isn't just a database that you can pick off and start doing lease options. It's a lot harder than people make out. And that's why I believe a lot of courses are sold on lease options, because it's probably easier to make money selling lease option courses than it is actually executing lease option strategies.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. And I've got a couple of extra queries that I have with the whole thing as well. One of them is tied to what you were saying, Rob, about there being fewer properties in negative equity now. The properties that are in negative equity in large numbers seem to be mostly in the northeast. When I've seen people doing this, a lot of it is in the northeast. There are booming parts of the northeast, but there are also more challenging areas. That's where a lot of the properties seem to be. And they're not the kind of properties that I would want to be owning personally, because the capital growth is unlikely to be there and it might be a bit more challenging along the way. Another reason why I would be a bit iffy about it is that it would need to be set up on a very firm legal footing, because let's be real about it. It's not the greatest of deals for the vendor, is it? Because you're taking the option to buy the property at some point in the future. So for you, it's giving you a one-way bet. It means if prices go up in the future, then you get to lock in today's prices in the future. If it goes against you, or you don't want to do it, then you just won't take that option and the problem reverts to them. So it's not the best deal. It is going to be an option for people who don't have many other options. And therefore, if it does come to the point where you want to exercise this option, they're just like, hang on, this is not a very good deal. They could make life difficult and make it difficult to exercise that option if you haven't set things up exactly right. So I'm not saying that it's not right for anyone. Not at all. And to be fair, it's something that I'm going to explore more on the next series of the Property Geek podcast, because it's not something I want to write off without understanding it in a lot of detail, because I've never done it. But while I don't think it's wrong for everyone, it's certainly not right for everyone either. And as Rob's alluded to, it's quite easy to sell courses about. It was sort of flavour of the month at one point. Then we sort of had the rent to rent period, and I'm not quite sure what we're into now. But there always seems to be something that's getting pushed quite heavily. When that happens, it doesn't mean that this has suddenly become a really brilliant idea. It's just the fact that these things do seem to move in trends and cycles. There are people who've been executing lease options very successfully for a very long time, just doing it quietly. It's not that everyone suddenly started doing it now. So I hope we haven't come across as sounding massively negative, but I think it is worth balancing it out a little bit, because you're going to get people who are pushing all the benefits. So it's worth not writing off those benefits at all, but looking at the other side of it so you can make a balanced decision about whether it's going to be right for you.
That's right. So, Roy, hopefully that helps. There are certainly things to be wary of. It's probably, as we said, wrong for more people than it is right for people. However, there are certain people who execute this well, and that doesn't mean you should write it off completely. But it's probably not something that we're going to do anytime soon. Right, so that's another episode. If you'd like to find the links to this episode and all the others, go to thepropertyhub.net/property advice. Another thing you might like to do is join us on a Property Hub Summit. We do them every quarter and we mastermind a group of people and get into real detail about their strategies, where they're at and where they're trying to get to, and build out that plan. If you'd like to join us, places are limited. We're only 16 per day and we only do it 4 days a year. Text Summit, your email address, so Summit space your email address to 88802. That's Summit, leave a space, type your email address to 88802, and we will send you all the info. Or, of course, go to thepropertyhub.net/summit.
So we will leave you there, but only for a couple of days, because we're going to be back on Thursday with the Property Podcast. So we hope we'll see you then. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.